we are partway through a run because, well, yeah, I was having a discussion about various stuff and managed to, yeah, accidentally, say having a discussion, like I was talking to myself, but yeah, managed to accidentally give away some pretty identifying information, so I'm like, yeah, let's not do that. Hence this video has been restarted. Honestly, at some point I do plan to just say, yeah, so I am, because realistically, no one cares. Or at least, yeah. There are definitely people who dislike me and who have in the past sent hate, etc. But realistically, no one who cares enough to actually act on. Well, you'd have to, yeah, even if I did give away my real name, that still gives you a surprisingly little amount. It would give you my university, but it wouldn't give you much more. But anyway, yes, we have died a couple of runs today, but honestly, I'm feeling fairly good. I'm just taking these incredibly slowly, and you know what? I'm getting good results. These ones are going well. Yeah, I was stuff I'd been discussing in this was, yeah, one huge thing was a discussion I'd had with one of my most extroverted friends, to the extent that and I was introduced to another friend entirely by this first one on her birthday, and it's a running joke between me and the second friend. Not doing names is so annoying. That this first one is just so incredibly extroverted. It's kind of hilarious. Yeah, and how basically she said, actually, no, you know what? It's very much a skill I kind of learned, and I found that interesting and discussed a lot about that. But you know what? That's about, yeah, things I found hard, and the parts where I found, yeah, actually socializing, etc., and being extroverted is kind of a skill. I mean, yeah, okay, whether or not I'm extroverted is still a very weird question. Depends very much on exactly how you measure it, and I don't know the answer myself, but yeah, that's a whole discussion. That's a whole barrel of worms. But the other thing I was discussing was basically about, well, yeah, the thing that got me onto it was thinking about, okay, how do you actually change yourself? And because I have changed a whole heck of a lot in many ways over the past few years, and it's I'd say the underlying things driving me have remained fairly similar a lot of the time, but how do you go about significantly changing who you are? And one of the things, which is kind of which I had a discussion with my friend, because these two friends, both of whom I mentioned previously, were no, you're, we were having a discussion about something, and they were no, you're one of the most extroverted physicists we know, and I pointed out to them that was incredible confirmation bias, given that, I went out of my way to get to know both of them. That's not necessarily a representative sample of all my friendships, so that's dubious as heck. There's huge confirmation bias does not mean that I'm necessarily successfully extroverted in most of my relationships and friendships, but it was interesting to think about because I realized, wait a second, well, yeah, the discussion I then had later was basically no, you're aware that's not exactly who I am. That's me putting in effort. That's me having learnt from another friend of mine and having put in a lot of effort to not a lot of effort, but still a conscious effort to try and do what I can to improve myself and to improve my life. Because I would say I would say, like, there's definitely nothing implicitly wrong with being introverted. However, and, like, it's a vibe, you know, that's how I still spend most of my life. But it was more the fact that I wanted to have it more as a setting that I could use one side or the other of. And there was like, yeah, one particular thing which kind of was somewhat holding me back, and so it was like discussions of various, basically, how could you learn to change? How could you end up changing who you are? And like, is that necessarily a bad thing? Because like, there's I'd say the reason I changed who I was, or I attempted to make some changes. I don't think I have entirely, but I think I have made progress on the front. The reason was not because I wanted anyone else to think better of me. The sole reasoning was because I thought I would be happier with that change, and I think that's that's something that's really worth carefully. Like, if you decide to change, make sure it's definitely yourself for whom you are changing, because it's very, very, very possible to live and to be entirely happy with yourself without anyone else's affirmation. It's not necessarily easy, and it's not necessarily easy, and it's something I fail at. It's not something I fail at socially. Like, I'm very happy knowing that I am a good person, but it is definitely, like, regardless of like how many people I spend time hanging out with, etc., I don't treat that as a metric. And like, yeah, I've got my metric is the metric largely, because obviously you do want to be able to take input from other people, but my metric is I have a fairly high standard for how much I need to know someone and trust someone before I will. At the point where I do reach that level of trust, then I take a lot from, like, I do place a lot of trust in their opinions, but many friendships can't, like, I don't know. If you meet me for a short period of time and think I'm weird, I mean, okay, for starters, you're right, and I'm fairly proud of the fact, but secondly, like, that's not going to really, for better or for worse, define how I see myself. Because, like, I know how short a period of time that is. I know I couldn't make an accurate image of someone else up in my mind over that short period of time, and I don't think many people could. So I kind of feel like, okay, well, it doesn't make too much difference. But yeah, so the whole question of, like, what motivates you to change yourself is, yeah, that's the whole question. But like, I was fairly happy with the fact that, you know, I am happy with who I am. Like, this is I'm not doing this because I feel I'm lacking something necessarily, but I'm doing this because I feel like I could be even happier, etc. Like, I definitely can improve things about my life. Like, you can be happy and still know there's room for improvement. So, like, a large part of that was attempting to just get better at like getting to know more people and meeting new people, because I'm absolutely god awful at that. And one of I kind of noticed that one of the funny things about that is arguably one of the reasons why I am so comfortable doing YouTube, is the fact that my main like difficulty when meeting new people is I always have the concern that, oh, what if they're just being polite? That's the main anxiety I have. I don't really care, or I can very much live with it if someone's like, nah, he's an absolute idiot, I don't want to spend time with him. Like, that I can live with, but the concern is that someone would think I don't know what to tell me, and that they would and I'd be like making things worse for them by like them feeling societal pressure not to. And I mean, yeah, you can trace that back a large way, because like, yeah, I felt a lot of peer pressure as a kid. So like, obviously everything's interconnected, and there's a lot of stuff going on in making me who I am, as is the case for everyone. But yeah, the reason I mention all of this is because I basically said much of this, albeit in slightly briefer form, because I'm sure you knew a lot of it, to my one, like, probably one of the most extroverted friends I have. One of two, I'd say. And she was, and as I was saying, I was like, this is something of a skill I want to work on. I'm like, well, okay, I don't know if a skill is necessarily the right word per se. Like, I don't know if you feel you're, like, intrinsically very, very extroverted. Like, you seem like this is just who you are. It's not necessarily a skill. She was just like, no, I know it's a skill. Yeah, like, this is something that, like, as a child, I, like, actively worked on improving, etc. And it's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Like, even the person who I was like, oh yeah, you've got to be the most, like, fundamentally extroverted. Like, if there was ever anyone who I was like, yeah, you are just at heart a strong extrovert, it was like, no. It actually turns out that really wasn't the case. And now, I'm thinking about a conversation I had with another friend who I also saw in a very, very similar light, and realising they didn't say quite the same thing, but I'm realising that could now be correlated with it. So yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. Again, I'm slightly misusing the definition of extrovert and introvert. Like, standard definition, the like proper definitions, I believe, are whether you gain or lose, or they relate to whether you gain or lose energy from spending time with other people. I personally think, yeah, precisely definitions of energy are even a little bit weird, because I know personally I feel like I have like physical energy and like mental energy, and socializing tends to recharge mental energy but drains physical energy. Believe me, I'm well aware of how ad hoc pseudoscience-y those uses of energy are, but hopefully you get vaguely what I mean. Yes, when I'm saying energy there, I'm more referring to capacity for interactions, i.e. physical or social interactions with things or people. But yeah, that was something that really struck home to me, because it was like, okay, wait a second, no, if this person who I really see is like being really, really good on this front, actually, or like naturally very good at this, like had to put a lot of time and effort into it, apparently. It's like, huh. But yeah, so all of that discussion then got me on to, changing oneself. And that got me onto my attitude towards exams, because despite I got onto the fact that, like, one of the things I've actively tried to do as of late is try to, like, force myself to have positive outlooks about things, because I think there is a huge element to, like, yeah, what I said to this one friend when she was like, actually, no, Ninja, you're fairly extroverted. I was like, okay, for starters, confirmation bias. You're one of the friends I made in the period whilst I was trying very hard to be like this. I did not make too many friends over that period of time. So, like, there's a heavy confirmation bias there. Like, the vast majority of my friends I did not get to know by being extroverted. But yeah. But one interesting thing was, I don't think that is who I am. I think that is a good representation, though, of what I aim to be. And it was kind of the interesting thing. And I was then like, okay, yeah, what'd I say? This is just me rehashing that previous the thing where I doxed myself. But it was interesting, because it was like, yeah, it's kind of the thing of, like, how do you change who you are, and or like try and make improvements to who you are, etc. And one of the things I found that tends to kind of happen for me is, once I've decided to do something, it's kind of a case of, like, I try to make it a habit of being that person, even when, like, not trying to, like, so say the person I want to be is, like, naturally, like, far more extroverted than I am, and doesn't have to put any effort into that. Like, I feel the doesn't have to put any effort into it is kind of what we mean when we say someone has a personality trait. And I think that's the bit which is actually, when you phrase it like that, is kind of quite obvious in, like, a thing you can train, because, like, from that perspective, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. That because that's just how much effort it takes to do something, and we know that practicing something does does change the amount of effort it takes. And I think, yeah, I think when we say that someone changed who they are as a person, I think what we're saying is that they are, is that being a certain way is effortless to them, and that is a state you can reach with like practice, etc. Which is interesting. It's not something I'd hugely thought about before, because it's like, wait a second, I can somewhat change stuff fundamental to who I am, as long as I like care about it enough to make like an active effort to practice it as a skill. And it's like, huh, that's like the kind of nonsense you hear everywhere. It's kind of like, okay, maybe there actually is some truth to that, despite it sounding like, yeah, complete and utter nonsense. The like standard just motivational book stuff. But yeah, what this got me onto was something I've really tried to do, or really tried to improve about myself recently, which is basically like just having a positive outlook. Because I think there are definitely like I like that. I do think is something like seeing the best in things. I think is definitely something that you can kind of learn to become a part of, and I think that's something that would make me a lot happier as a person. Like there are definitely things like, yeah, I mean, for the fairly obvious reasons. And one thing I found fairly interesting. Let's decide what I want to do next. Yeah, one thing I did find fairly interesting with. Losing train of thought. Oh yeah, and one of the things I was going to call out is, like, I was saying that kind of as though it was, oh yeah, it's so easy to, like, well, I know I failed this, because I'm still, there are definitely, like, it was more the fact that, like, it requires you being in a position where, like, making that conscious decision to change your outlook is kind of possible. And, like, for me, there are definitely, I think, topics where it's an easy enough thing to do, like, it's not a huge shift from your existing opinion, and I know for me there are topics where that's not the case. So, for instance, the obvious one for me was exams, which is, yeah, I'm not a fan, really not a fan of exams, and there were certain points in time where the fact that in long periods of time, I am confident that I am good at physics. I'm confident that I'm a good physicist, that I can work on understanding a problem pretty well. I'm fairly confident in my abilities there. I don't know, I'm not amazing, but I'm good enough to be happy with it. However, exams, this one. Exams, that was not the case for a long time, and like I remember it being really cut up at one point in sixth form about the fact that they were doing awards for like every subject, and they had just been done like entirely on the basis of exam grades, and I was sitting there really sad because I knew the teachers knew, like, I'd been spending a lot of time on like pretty good physics, and like I improved a lot as a physicist because of that, but I still messed up on exams nearly constantly, and it's like, yeah, I kind of felt like I did deserve some recognition for it. I didn't really get any, and it's kind of like, right, this isn't going well. That's really bad. Okay, just de-aggro, play safe, de-aggro. But yeah, and it was kind of a challenge, and like that's one of the things I was gonna say I haven't improved on like tests and my perception of them, but I think I have. I don't think I've kind of moved them into a position where I see them as a good thing, or I see them as something like, oh yeah, I love tests. But what I do think I've managed to do is I've managed to get them to a position where I'm like, no, you know what? I'm accepting of them. I dislike them fundamentally. Like they really, the fact that the fact that my ability to do physics, something which is typically done over the course of months and years, like that's the length scale we tend to measure people working on physics on, that I'm about to be judged on this in a 3-hour exam. Like, come on, I'm sorry, what? How is that an accurate judgment? And yeah, I still logically absolutely hate them, and I still find it annoying when we get taught solely for exams and stuff like that. But one thing that I have improved on, I think, is my perception of them. And it's you know what? They're no longer this obstacle for me, because I think I saw them like that for ages. They're this obstacle in the way of me achieving what I want to achieve and being happy, and it's nah. Realistically, then and yeah, this was one thing which I was talking about is yeah. Realistically, I don't even think they're that much of a limiting factor. We always every point in your career, every point in your educational career up to if you go to university, including university, maybe depending on whether you go to a sixth form, whether you do an apprenticeship post GCSEs, whatever you do, even apprenticeships, etc. Even those things which are very, very hands-on, and which I think are kind of epic for that. Even those still, a lot of them, especially degree apprenticeships, do have a fairly large examined component. Yeah, okay, they're good, but maybe they're still not perfect. But I think they're still really, really good. But yeah, the one thing which I found for ages is it was every point in time we were always looking towards the next test. And that was always this one is going to be the one that determines my future. And that's weird, because if every test is going to be the one that uniquely determines your future, surely they can't all be the one that's going to determine your future. Surely one has to do so more than any of the others. And okay, you could argue that they all do, because they all have precisely the power to and this is probably the argument I might have made, is they all precisely have the power to stop what you want to do. But the thing is, I think realistically, most of the time, I don't think, and this was kind of just something I wanted to say for people, because I remember this being a really, really huge source of pressure in sixth form, which was A-levels, getting the grades to go to whichever university you wanted to go to. I remember one friend who initially planned for ages to do computer science at university, then fairly last minute changed his mind, decided he wanted to do maths, and he was applying to one of the hardest to apply to. Often that's conflated with prestigious, and that's not true, and also it's arguably not the hardest to apply to in certain metrics. It's kind of something that people like to say about it, but I think it's not necessarily true. But yeah, he was applying to Cambridge to study computer science. Last minute, he made the switch to maths, and because of that, despite the fact that actually they're really similar, I do have one friend who is studying computer science at Cambridge, and I speak to him very regularly, and we'll discuss concepts in maths because he's a good comp ski and I'm a physicist. And it's wait a second, no. He still knows a ton of maths, certainly in particular areas, lots more than I do. There are also areas where I know a lot more than he does, because he aside from if he wants to program a simulation program that's does fluids and does that, why would he ever need to know the ins and outs of the Navier-Stokes equations? What's the point for him? So there are obviously fields that are kind of irrelevant for both of us, but yeah, so there was a fair amount of overlap, and so I do think this person, who is one of the best computer scientists I knew, and arguably and I think would have been one of the better mathematicians, didn't make it in. And that was kind of like, wait a second. Like, had I not made it in, I think I would have been like, oh no, this is really the end of something. But I looked at this guy, and he's like, he's a really competent, like, person. It's like, no, there's no way that's going to prevent him being a, I mean, honestly, I'd expect some, like, combination of competency and mathematics, just knowing him. But, like, there's no way that's going to prevent him doing, like, computer science / maths as what he does. Like, no. It's like, and it was like, wait a second. But if I think, like, it's like, there's no way this exam or this interview process is going to, like, completely determine his life. Like, no, that's not how it's going to work. Like, he'll do something else that's incredibly cool. He'll manage to do that, and it's like, yeah, that's going to happen. I can't see it not happening for him, and it kind of has. And so it's like, wait a second, that's kind of interesting. Like, wait a second, so what I'm seeing here, and what it kind of took someone else not managing to, like, make the grades they wanted, or in this case, make the interview he wanted. Well, it took that to make me realise that, wait a second, if that holds true for him, then presumably it also, like, holds true to some extent for me. Like, not necessarily that I'm really good and will manage to achieve whatever I'm kind of aiming for, but it's like, if the exams aren't necessarily, if the exams are not a perfect process and aren't necessarily the be-all and end-all for him, then, like, why should they be for me? Don't like that we've got that spiderling stuck there. That could be incredibly helpful. That could be just really handy. It could also be really annoying. I don't know how I'm going to handle that. What do I do? Do we have what do we have down there? Okay, we've got an atom. That's good. Okay, this is fine. This was not what I wanted to do. I didn't really think before running over here. That's fine. Okay, good. But yeah, and so I don't know. I know this was a huge thing for, like, me and for lots of my friends. There was, like, huge stress over getting into like particular unis. And the thing I've just kind of found, I didn't realise you spawned so soon. The thing I've kind of just realised over time is, you know what? Yeah, I don't think it makes a huge amount of difference. Like, you will manage what you care about anyway. Like, one way or another. Largely just by sheer dint of the fact you care about it, you'll find some way to manage it. Which, yeah, I know it's absolutely freaking cliched, but, like, it is, like, actually trusting in that and kind of being like, no, that actually kind of does work. Like, if I have faith that it holds for my friend, then I should have faith that it holds for myself as well. And I think that was a really helpful way of looking at it for me. Like, there was this person I looked up to, and it's like, you know what? I can see something going wrong and there being a setback for this person. Despite the fact they're really good, yeah, I can definitely see a setback not being impossible. And it was like, wait a second, it doesn't have, if it's not a be-all and end-all for them, then why should it be for me? No. Come on. Please escape. Never really thought I'd be saying that. Come on, this can't be how this ends. We do have options. Oh, come on, not even knocked me out of that. Oh, great, this is annoying. This was the prototype King of Hurl boss fight. How am I going to manage this? Is there a way I can just, like, get this guy out? I mean, I don't know. It was interesting because, like, yeah, it was definitely a change. Like seeing this one friend, I was like, I believe you will go on to achieve great things. It's like, oh, okay. Well, they can, despite circumstances going against them. Maybe so can I. Okay. Looks like this is what we're doing now. Heal. Well, okay. That could have been worse. As in, I said that could have been worse. It's like, no, that's actually a pretty awful way to... But no, I mean, it's in, like, there... Okay, the run definitely could have been worse, but also there are far worse ways that could have died. That was, like, a fairly low odds of that happening, and again, I can try and be careful of that in future. Try and avoid manipulating spiderlings over in that direction. I can always try and, like, lead them back out this way. Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, because, like, I know I got so incredibly stressed, and, like, realising that, you know what, there is no single exam that will be a be-all and end-all. There is no single exam that cuts off all your future opportunities. Like, realistically, like, it may cut off that one thing that you have decided is going to be the way you're going to achieve your passion. Like, that's the... Yes, like, I guess that's the difference. That's the thing, like, yeah, definitely, like, this friend did not go to Cambridge. Really wanted to, did not go to Cambridge, but, like, the point is, did that, like, end him being an incredibly competent mathematician / computer scientist who'd go on to do great stuff? No, of course it didn't. So, yeah, that's kind of, like, been my attitude to exams. Like, I dislike them strongly. I think they're not a good way of ranking people, but then again, I don't think there is ever going to be a good way of ranking people. Like, the idea of an objective scale on which to rank people, even for, like, a particular... I guess for a particular role, where there is a particular measurable output, there necessarily must be an objective way of ranking people for that role. Like, surely, by definition of there being a well-ordered measurable output. And the fact that you can, but, like, I also don't know there's... Where that doesn't, even the existence of a hypothetical ranking does not imply that there is a test which can, aside from just seeing that person's performance, like, it doesn't imply that there is such a test that actually would exist to determine that a priori. In fact, I'd posit you could probably... I mean, yeah, you can... Yes, I'd argue you can more or less... You could probably show that there isn't, in some sense. Yeah, it depends how good a heuristic you want, I guess. But in the end, any test is going to be a heuristic, and it will favour people with like... I was going to say certain abilities. This is another thing which kind of I dislike the notion of, because for ages I was kind of like, yeah, I had in my head, okay, to what extent are we born with, like, talents? To what extent is it that we work on improving talents throughout our lifetimes? And it's kind of interesting, because even the, like, working on talents throughout our lifetimes, like, even that is a talent in and of itself. Like, I'd say there's something strongly to be said that for the fact that, like, being strongly, like, motivated is definitely a skill. I mean, like, it definitely... But if that is a skill, if, like, the ability to motivate yourself to learn new skills is itself a skill, how do you learn the ability to motivate yourself to, etc., etc.? And the conclusion I've kind of come to from this, just, like, from my own life, is that it revolves around it does largely revolve around the fact you will get good at that thing you care about. And that may be really disheartening. So I replied to a comment on a YouTube video about Oxford entrance exams. Once it was the honestly, that was really fun. I can't remember the guy's name. There's a I don't remember. It's some guy whose thing is like to learn new skills. That's his whole YouTube channel. I want to say Mike Boyd. Mike Boyd is the guy. Yeah, and he did this thing, and it was good fun because like that then prompted me to go and like look up maths interview questions for like Oxbridge, and that was kind of good fun. Some of those they're good fun brain teasers. So, but yeah, it was. But yeah, there was a comment, and it was basically like. It was kind of as though the person didn't say this. The person was lovely, but it was kind of as though like by making this video, Mike had like completely devalued their experience, because like he went from a bad mark on this test to albeit a borderline mark. And like there's a lot of extra detail there. So there's, for instance, the fact that he was an engineering student in the past, and so like there are lots of like fundamental analytic skills and like ways of handling problems and equations which like even if you don't necessarily remember all the calculus, you're unlikely to have completely forgotten over that interim. Like the ways of structuring thoughts, I think would be the best way I'd phrase it. Like there are ways like the fact that when you see a problem, you are used to converting that problem to a formula. Like that's a skill which I don't think leaves you particularly quickly, and which like is like very helpful for those sorts of problems. But yeah, and so it was kind of like, okay, so little bit he already had a little bit of an unfair advantage, but someone else kind of came back and was like, well, you know what, I spent absolutely ages practicing for I don't think it was maths, but it was some subject somewhere. It was like, actually, like, they were basically saying don't feel bad about yourself if, like, based on this video, you don't manage to do it, because they're obviously like, well, you know what, I like, if he managed to learn this in a day, and I didn't, then does that make me a worse person? And this person's reply was like, well, no, and this person basically said, well, okay, I don't think I'm a bad I don't think I'm just fundamentally lazy or bad or anything like that. I think I'm just not as good at it. I'm like naturally not as good at it. And that was kind of their response to this. And I think it's interesting, and I made a reply which I was kind of like, I don't think it's as simple as that. I don't think it's as simple as you're not naturally as good at this. And my reply, my thoughts would be, I think it's that you're not. And this is going to sound patronising, and I'll explain why I don't think it is in a second. It was my thought is I don't think you're as motivated to do it, and I don't mean, and like that's kind of like telling someone who like put hours and hours and hours into studying maths that like they're not motivated to do maths. Obviously, like no, that's completely wrong. But I think there's a conflation which happens a lot in our education system, which is that there is one way to do a particular subject, and that's kind of necessary for a lot of stuff in the education system, but it's not a good way of thinking about lots of subjects, because there's no one way to enjoy and to be good at maths. Like there are lots of different approaches you can take. So for instance, I find with physics, for instance, the thing that I find probably the most rewarding with, well, there are two things I find incredibly rewarding with physics, and there are lots that I don't. So I honestly find somewhat rewarding literally just the process of just sitting down and churning through an absolutely gigantic equation and like getting that down into a somewhat reasonable form. Often that's actually like fairly mindless. Like I work with some fairly large equations. Okay, not gigantic in the grand scheme of things, but like enough that if I show them to my friends, they instantly break out the disgusting reaction on Discord. But like so that's like on the scale of things which motivate me. That won't get me out of bed in the morning, but that's not something I'm unmotivated to do. Well, more importantly, that's not something I see it very much as like, okay, that's a means to the end. I am not really motivated to do this, but you know what? If it's going to get me this particular answer that I'm looking for, and will solve this and will solve a problem that I care about, then yeah, I will work on it. However, I will be somewhat motivated to do this pointless algebra. However, it's really interesting, for me at least, that there are lots of things for which that is not the case and which that doesn't work on. So, for instance, you could give me the same algebra, but in you give me the same algebra, but in I'm probably gonna switch out for a bit, or switch out to the end of this video, because I don't think I've got enough time for a good run. But yeah, you could give me exactly the same algebra, but have it on a problem sheet question. I just won't enjoy it as much, because one of the things, with those things, I will take my time with it. I will consider the problem from many different directions before I decide it's worth investing that much time and that much work into the algebra. And I'm used to the algebra not working, and to it being, because most physics problems it doesn't, and to me having to put a lot of work into. Okay, well, given we can't understand this now, how am I going to make it understandable? I'm going to plot it off or whatever. And that's all it relies on me having. Thank you, Nautilus. It relies on me having an aim, which I am fundamentally interested in solving. And it's interesting because that particular the actual act is exactly the same. I can literally I was doing a problem sheet today, and the act of putting a star next to a question to say this is non-compulsory literally motivated me to do that question. It's that is so stupid. Why does that motivate me to do the question? But I think it's fundamentally just you. I think yeah, everyone cares about something. I mean, I think there's almost a evolutionary / physical imperative to care about stuff, because I don't know. I don't have an argument. I feel like you certainly can't care about an infinite amount of stuff and completely care about it. I don't think that's something you can do. Because there's only so much space in your mind. So there definitely is a cap on the amount you can care about. I personally would posit that cap's probably fairly small, if I'm honest. Oh, you just don't. They don't sell for anything. Kinda not worth my time selling that, man. Same with this. Oh, that's interesting. I mean, they're both frostbow items. I really prefer the inventory space to anything else, if I'm honest, so goodbye. But yeah, I don't know, because it was just a little bit sad to see this person being no, I genuinely don't think good enough. And my response was you can still be incredibly motivated to do maths and not necessarily want to do maths in the precise way that is prescribed by someone else, or work on the precise. There are a huge variety of maths problems, and being motivated on one kind or another doesn't preclude motivation on in other directions. And it's kind of and because I did a lot of Oxbridge interview prep as well, and it's I don't think, and then I did not do well enough on that to make it in where I applied. And so it's yeah. Does that make me a bad physicist? Right, I don't think it actually does. I mean, that is my subjective opinion, but in fairness, I'm talking about being happy with myself and with my life, and my subjective opinion is the one that matters there. Yeah, so it was basically just like, okay, I don't think I don't think to the extent that I care about it, I am a bad physicist. Solely for the fact that, like, I didn't make the grades yeah, despite the fact that I've, like, I tutored multiple people to get an A star in physics, I did not get an A star in physics myself. So, like, there's definitely... It's like, do I think that necessarily makes me a bad physicist? Well, no. No, I don't think that does. Just the fact that I didn't, like, perform well in this particular ranking. So, yeah, it made me really sad to see that comics. It's like, no, you know what? Like, I don't think this person had been fairly convinced they just didn't have the ability, and I don't think I think like they fundamentally didn't have this ability, and I don't believe that's the case. What I think was far, far, far more likely was the fact that the way that, like, the particular problems were being put forward, like, wasn't the best way for that particular person. I think that's far more often the case than is someone doesn't have the ability. Like, obviously there are definitely particular disorders, such as, I dislike the phrase disorder for this, honestly, but, like, yeah, people's minds work in different ways, and, like, dyslexia, dyscalculia, they're both things. Hello. Yeah, sure. But yeah, those are definitely both things that exist, and, like, but I think a lot of the time it's just, yeah, I think a lot of the time there's a huge amount of saying, like, a couple of things. You're either not good enough, that's either natural and that's something you can't change, which there are definitely some elements to, but I don't think it's the whole story. And there's the, like, but aside from those things you can't change about yourself, because, like, yeah, like, there are definitely physical attributes and, like, genetic stuff which do change the way the way people perform. Or, like, so for instance, I perform very, very badly at having blue eyes. Yeah, I know, eye colour reveal, or eye colour narrowing down at least. I perform absolutely terribly on that metric, and yeah, okay, that definitely is genetic. Or, like, there definitely is a physiological component. That's probably, having blue eyes probably isn't a skill I can learn. Where's this? Was worth a try equipping it before I left. I figured it would, you know, could be interesting. But yeah, so I don't know. I just wanted to kind of go on this rant because, like, yeah, I don't think it's a hard, or it's like, yeah, you either are physically, biologically, completely incapable of something, or you're not motivated enough to achieve it. And I think neither of those. I do not think it's as clear. Well, I do think to some extent it is a question of motivation, but I don't think it's a question of motivation in the broad brush terms it's often presented as. I think it's a question of, like you can be incredibly motivated to, say, do something like, say, go to Oxford to study maths, in the case of this one person, and completely fail at that. Does that mean that, like, you were unable to? Does that mean you weren't motivated enough? I mean, there's also, I think, quite a large random element as well, which played a role in this particular instance. But, like, yeah, there is, I think a huge thing at play is just whether or not the goal, which was fundamentally, like, studying maths, like, that was fundamentally the skill that this person wanted to be tested on. Or that's what they thought they wanted to be tested on, because we're kind of taught there is, you study maths, and there is one way. There might be sub-disciplines within it, but there's still, like, you study maths. That is a single discrete thing. It's like, nah, it's not a single discrete thing. And the thing that's being tested is not. Like, when someone is testing maths ability, that is also not a single discrete thing. So, yeah. Like, you're... Yeah, so I just wanted to have that rant, basically. Oh, let's do the check. First off, this is the area. Yeah, Brian just could walk through there. But yeah, so I basically want to raise that because, yeah, I think it can kind of... It sounds like almost a hopeless case that you... Like, if you're not motivated enough, well, motivation definitely is a skill to some extent. There are lots of things that are. And, like, if you can't get that, if you aren't motivated to, like, get more motivation, how would you change that? And, like, if motivation is what determines you, because it's like, no, I really think it's just everyone cares different amounts about different things. I don't think there are... I'm sure there is a certain amount that one's mind can only hold a certain number of cares, and so, okay, there is some limiting factor there. And maybe that does vary from person to person. I don't know, I'm not a biologist, never looked at any of this, but it's like, okay, you know what, I feel like, yeah, it's fundamentally very, very dubious. Dang it. So, yeah, going as quickly as you can, or using a speed boost as quickly as you can is a good move, basically always, in racing. Just because, like, do not wait for the bar to fully charge, basically. Because if you do, you're very, very likely... like, yeah, there's a snowball effect with these things. Yes, I hope that makes very sense. I'm well aware I'm rambling as well, because it's... So because one thing I don't necessarily find it easy to do, and which may be a fundamental biological limitation, or it may be that I just don't care enough to change it. I feel like I care a fair amount, but maybe I just need to care more, or need to care in a different direction, as it were, in order to change it. I'll take it. Because this might, yeah. I do pass the lap line if I do that. Sorry, Joe. I don't know to what extent that was live accurate. Like, that genuinely might have been possible in live. That trick. So I'm going to have to look in to see if I can find any evidence for that. Because I know, like, the car flying upwards definitely was possible in live. I don't know whether or not... I don't know exactly how, where you can and cannot, yeah, where the triggers for the laps are. I don't know how that's determined. Yeah, so I wanted to get up onto my little soapbox here and just have a chat about it, because, yeah, I feel like if you care about something, you will do... I do believe, like, yeah, you will end up with the motivation you need to do well in it. It's just the question as to whether or not the way it's being... the way society wants you to do that thing is the exact way you want to do it. It's kind of how well those match up, I think, a lot of the time, which is kind of fundamental to this. Like, it's completely possible to love something, be the best in the world at it, and to be doing it in a way that's absolutely, completely useless to anyone but yourself. Like society, where it's like, nah, that's right. I mean, I think your classic example might be Van Gogh there. Like as in, okay, sure, society did later on, but that didn't make a shred of difference to him and his depression. Like, he was still the best in the world at it, but wasn't the particular style of painting that people were looking for then. Turns out now that's significantly changed, and turns out it's worth rather a lot of money. But yeah, I don't know. I'd be interested in hearing people's thoughts on this. Well, as always, when I kind of get into these kind of somewhat deeper topics, I'm really interested in hearing everyone else's thoughts because, yeah, like, as I said, like as said earlier, I will never blindly take on anyone else's like opinions for my own. Also, like, I will never take them on as like ways to live my life, but and like that kind of, there needs to be something that either comes from within me or something that in fairness, I wasn't necessarily trying to eat myself out of bounds. I was. I mean, the answer's luck, more or less. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, this is kind of where I'm at the moment. And I'll see whether or not this changes in the future. But it seems to me like I'm inherently motivated by anything I care about. But just because I care about physics doesn't mean I'm motivated to do my physics problem shit, necessarily. Like, that is kind of, for me, personally, a means to an end. I think it's the best way of phrasing it. Okay, so I now, unless J-Man crashes fairly shortly, I now have to get fairly lucky with... Ooh, wait, that might be enough, actually. Nope, that's definitely not. Oh, that wasn't even J-Man anyway, it was CSS. Don't just the well, yeah, it must just be the line I'm taking. I seem to have always very good luck with like other people having issues with those with the invisible things spawning, and I don't normally have that much, so I must just take a fairly safe line on it. Don't know. Yeah, that was Ninja's daily dose of getting up on his soapbox and claiming to understand a world he knows he understands nothing of. tried. I don't think I'm getting far enough. Oh, I did. I feel a little bit dubious about that, actually. That I don't think I should be able to. Oh well, I've probably... So yeah, that's literally what's happening then, okay. On the upside, maybe I'll get better at doing this turn. So yeah, evidently the game's meant to handle that slightly differently. I do think that there probably is like a way you could absolutely just chuck yourself over the line or something. I think that's probably quite possible. But I don't think... I don't think it's... Yeah, certainly not the way I'm managing to there. There's got to be... I suspect it's maybe something like the game's meant to despawn you a little sooner, or something like that. Or it's meant to respawn you a little sooner, I guess. It's just not fast enough, and therefore your card travels further than it should do by the time the game notices you're out of bounds. Whereas, like, just chucking yourself up to one side wouldn't have that same effect. So, yeah. Help. Well, that was arguably somewhat expected. It will be fitting if this was the way I completed it. Oh, come on, CSS deserves this at this stage. Messed this up an incredible number of times. Okay, well, backwards. Issue is, I want to be able to. Okay, can I? Dang it! It's worth a try. Yeah, so I can't. There's no way I can be here and still see. Oh no! There we have it. Yeah, I don't know. I think this has deteriorated hugely, so I think I'm going to call it here. But I don't know. Yeah, I'm really interested in hearing people's thoughts on this. Thank you very much for watching. As always, I've been NinjaOfLU. I realised the music ended ages ago, and I just didn't notice that. NinjaOfLU, and I'll see you around. Bye.